Hello and great to meet you all again at another Oxygen XML live experience. My name is Alim Belu and I will be your host for today's live event, the third installment of the Working with DITA in Oxygen webinar series called Advanced Profiling and Reuse Strategies. So, to help you achieve mastery in more advanced data concepts, my colleague Sorin Carbonaru, software developer at Synchrosoft, the company that develops the Oxygen suite of products, returns with great ideas and tips for profiling and reusing data content. But more on that in just a little bit when Sorin will start his presentation. But until then, let me give you some useful information about today's webinar. As always, all of our events are being recorded, so today's event makes no difference. After the webinar comes to an end, the recording will be made available on the event page on our site, oxygenxml.com, along with the slides and samples of Sorin's presentation. And also, the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel titled Oxygen XML. Another important aspect is that as we go along, we encourage you to ask us questions by using the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface, where the well-known Radu Koravu, project manager at Synchrosoft, will help us by answering your questions in real time. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. So let's welcome Sorin Carbonaru to tell us more. Hello, Sorin.
Hello, Alin. Hello, Radu. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a new webinar. I'm glad I can be of help again, and I'm glad I can continue guiding you in your DITA and oxygen journey. I want to mention right from the beginning that I'm not going to insist on concepts and how to do certain things in oxygen, things that we have on the things that we have discussed in the previous two webinars. So we have laid a foundation, and today we're building on that. Before diving into the content, I want to show you the agenda for today. We're going to start with some easier to grasp concepts, such as Conref ranges, Conref push, and profiling attribute groups. And then we're going to discover some more advanced topics as we go through the webinar, such as subject scheme maps, key scopes, and branch filtering. And that being said, it's time to get started. So the first concept for today is about Conref ranges. We already know how to create content references, but until now we created them in, let's say, a one-to-one manner. So we had one referencing element and one referenced element. Conref ranges allow us to create a single referencing element that will pull the content from multiple data elements, from a range of elements actually. The start and the end elements must be of the same type as the referencing element, but the other elements inside the range can be of any type. And you can create conref ranges by using the conref end attribute in conjunction with conref or conkeyref, depending if we are creating direct references or key references. So it's already time to switch to oxygen, and I'm using pretty much the same project as the last time. And here in the getting started section, I have this removing the battery topic that I want to open. And here, if I show the full tags with attributes, we can see that the steps here are actually three conrefs, sorry. So this is the way we have seen until today. But today I want to make use of the conref range concept. And here in my reusables warehouse, I have these 3 steps that I want to reuse. They all have IDs. They make a range here. And back into my removing battery topic, in order to create my single content reference, I'm going to use the reuse content action. And here we choose the location where we pull the content from, the reusables.data topic. Now we will select the first step from our range, and here we will select the last one, the value of the Conref end attribute. And this is our last step. And we hit insert and close. And now, as we can see, we have created a single step, a single content reference that pulls the content from a range of elements in our warehouse topic. So this is how easy it is to create Conref ranges. Moving on, the next topic is about Conref push. This technique allows us to reverse the direction of reuse from pull to push. Until now, we pulled the content from another topic. Using this technique, the Conref push technique, we will insert the content from the source topic into the target topic relative to a target element that must have an ID attribute set on it. With a push, the referencing element can be rendered before, after, or in place of the referenced element. And this technique is based on the conaction attribute. So not connection, but conaction. And this attribute determines the location of the reused content. There is a limitation when using this technique. It is not possible to push a range of elements. So let's see this technique in action. In the insert the SIM card topic, I have several content references here, but I also have a step, this one, which is defined right here in this topic. And I already have an ID defined on this element. And I want to insert another step before this one. So this one says that tells us that we need to insert the SIM card into the SIM card slot. But let's say we want to insert another step before that one that says that we perhaps need to clean the SIM slot if necessary. And how do we do that? How do we push the content there? We will use the contextual menu. And here under the reuse submenu, we have the push current element action. And this shows a very familiar dialog. Here we need to select the target topic, which is insert sim.data. We select the target element, and then we select the location where we want to push our content. So we want to push before the insert sim step in the insert sim.data topic. And once we click OK, we can see here that a few things have happened. We have this push before label here, which tells us that we have pushed this step before another step. And here we have another automatically generated step, which marks the location of our target element. And this is here mainly for validation purposes. We want to make sure that 2 consecutive steps, or in general 2 consecutive elements, are allowed in the target topic. So this is how you can push content from a topic into another topic. Now you may ask, when this technique can be helpful, right? And one example is, let's assume that um, we have a topic that gets regenerated every night, and we need to insert some content every day in that topic. Of course, using the push conref technique, if we know that we have a target element there with a well-known ID, we can always insert our content after this topic is regenerated. Let's move on and talk about profiling attribute groups. We already know what profiling attributes are, and we know how to use them and when to use them and what their purpose is. Now, profiling attribute groups are intended for situations where a predefined profiling attribute applies to multiple specialized subcategories. Let's say until now we used the audience attribute with only two values, general and technician. But now we want to refine our profiling, and we need to profile our content for software technicians or hardware technicians or both technicians. And we can use profiling attribute groups for this. Now, a major advantage when using profiling groups is that you don't need to add new profiling attributes in your framework. You don't need to create a specialization. You don't need to edit your schema. You can simply reuse existing data profiling attributes and specify multiple subcategories. And let's do just that. So here in my data map, I have this troubleshooting section with two specific sections, software and hardware troubleshooting. And let's say we want to profile this, right? First, we need to define our attribute because I don't have it defined. Let's go to the attributes and condition sets preferences page, and let's create our attribute for the data framework. The attribute is called audience. And now let's add the values. The first value will be general. And now we will define our profiling group. And the syntax is as follows. We first provide the category name, in our case, technician. Then we open a parenthesis and we provide the subcategories separated by spaces. The first category, subcategory, software, and then hardware. And we close the parenthesis. Okay. And now we can use the values that we have defined. Oh, sorry. I was in the right place to profile our content. So the first reference will be profiled using the software value. And as you can see, the technician category was also selected automatically. And we profile the second reference using the hardware value. And let's say the entire troubleshooting section will be profiled for technicians in general, for all kinds of technicians. Okay, now let's create a data file that makes use of the profiling group that we have defined. Here in the project view, we'll create a new file in the data folder. It will be a data filter, and let's give it a name. Let's say we want to exclude the technicians. And I want to mention that when using profiling attribute groups, the syntax when writing our properties changes a little bit. Instead of providing the attribute name in for the ATT attribute, we provide the category name. In our case, technician. And now let's create a condition set which uses the DITA file that we have created. Let's give it a name. And let's use the DITA file. Okay, now we can use the profiling condition set that we have defined. And as you can see, all the content that was profiled for any kind of technicians is now excluded because we used the category name here. If we want to exclude a specific subcategory, we can use the val attribute and provide the subcategory name. Let's say software. And now if we reload our map to reapply the condition set, you can see that only the software troubleshooting section is now excluded. We can also use this data val with profiling groups when performing a validation. And we need to select this use data val filters checkbox. And we will apply the current condition, which right now is actually exclude software technicians. And if we perform the validation, we can see that we have a warning here. In this topic, we have a link to the topic that is now excluded because of the applied condition set. So I'm just going to remove this and move on. Okay, now it's time to go back to our slides and let's talk about concept that it's a bit more advanced. Subject scheme maps. Now, a subject scheme map is a special kind of map which is used to define sets of controlled values instead of topic references and map references. And these controlled values can be bound to data attributes as well as to element and attribute pairs. For example, we can bind a set of values to the audience attribute, or we can bind a specific set of values to the audience attribute, but only for the paragraph element, for example. These values can be shared with your team without having to modify the schema, just by sharing the subject scheme map. And one use case of subject scheme maps is to create and manage custom profiling values in DITA without having to write a DITA specialization. So let's create our first subject scheme map. We need to append it as a child to our current map. So we're using this action from here. We select the subject scheme template from the recently used. I already have it here, but if you don't have it, you can simply use the filter from here. And let's give a name to our subject scheme map. Okay. Now for publishing, for our publishing, it's very important to set the type attribute to subject scheme. Okay, so I've done this. And now let's have a look at our subject scheme map. Here in our subject scheme map, we define a key which will be used to create our profiling values. If you watch the previous webinar, you may remember that for the product attribute, we have two values, x1 and x2. But let's say that today I want to create a new value, a new product, an x2 Pro. So this will be, let's say, a sub value of x2. It will be a special kind of x2. And in order to do that, we need to bind this key to the product attribute. So here in this element here, we provide the attribute name, product, and we bind it to the key name, product subject key. Now we save our subject scheme app, and the validation error from here tells us that our subject scheme map is already used uh, because it tells us that the values, the profiling values like x2 that we used until now are not valid anymore because these values from here are now used instead. Um, let's create our proper values. I'm going to promote these values here on the first level, and the first value will be x1, and here we have navigation titles for each of the values. These navigation titles are used, for example, here in the profiling tab as the labels for the checkboxes. The first navigation title will be x1. The second value is x2 and the validation and the navigation title is x2. And the third value will be x2 Pro. And the navigation title, I don't know why I'm saying validation, will be x2 Pro. And as I said in the beginning, we want this to be subordinated to x2. So we demote this and we create a hierarchy. And now we can see our new values. So we have x1, x2, and x2 Pro as a special kind of x2. Now, let's go to our specifications topic and add a new entry here for the camera. So let's say our Pro model has a 64 megapixel camera. And let's profile this for X2 Pro. Okay, I already have a data val file defined from the last time, which was used to only keep the content for X1. Now, if we keep only the first property from this data val file, this says that we will exclude all the content that has the product attribute set to X2. But because of the way we have created our hierarchy, because X2 Pro is a special kind of X2, when we will apply this data val file, we will notice that the X2 Pro is also excluded. Let me edit the X1 condition set and use our X1 data val. Okay. And now if we go back to our specifications and we apply the X1 condition set, as I said before, you can see that both the X2 and the X2 Pro models were excluded. If we want to exclude only the X2 Pro, then we will need to provide the proper value here for the val attribute. And now if we reload this, we see that only the X2 Pro profiled content was excluded. One more thing I want to mention before moving on is that you can also remove some profiling attributes that you don't need. For example, in our project, let's say we don't need this platform attribute because we only create Android phones, right? So let's assume this. In order to remove the platform attribute, we need to create a new binding, and we will bind the platform attribute to nothing. So we will leave the second input field empty, and here we will provide the attribute name, platform. We will save the subject scheme map, and now if we go back to our profiling tab, we can see that the platform attribute is not here anymore. Okay, let's switch to our slides. And now let's talk about a concept that has been introduced some years ago in DITA 1.3. But first, we have to know that all key definitions and all key references exist within a key scope. So even if we didn't know about this concept, and even if we don't uh, specifically create or define a key scope, all key defs and all key refs exist within a key scope. And each key scope has its own key space, which is used to resolve the key references that occur within that scope. In this example here, we have this data map hierarchy, which defines keys with the same name on different levels in the hierarchy, but with different values. And this is the key space of an unnamed implicit key scope that is created for this data map hierarchy. And here in our key space, we can see that for the key with the name model, we have only one value, the value from the higher level wins. But what if we had something like this with one data map and one topic, which is referenced twice in this map. So these are two topic references. And inside this topic, we have a reference to a key with this name. And here we have another key with the same name, also referenced inside this same topic. Now, if we want to resolve these keys to different values, we need to create key scopes for each branch, because the key scopes are the ones that enable us to specify different sets of key definitions for different branches. And we can create key scopes by specifying the key scope attribute on a map or a topic ref element, including specializations of these elements. And let's go back to our project and use key scopes. I want to close all these files. And here in the troubleshooting section, I want to add some more topics. Let's say that for each kind of troubleshooting, before starting the process, we want to make sure that the warranty is still valid. Therefore, I'm going to insert a new topic before this one here, and its name will be warranty check. And this topic will say something like, first, make sure the warranty is valid. Now, let's say that for each section, for software troubleshooting and for hardware troubleshooting, we want to have specific title here for the warranty check topic. Let's say here we want warranty check for software troubleshooting and here warranty check for hardware troubleshooting. And for this purpose, I'm going to create a key definition with a keyword. And let's call the name, the key title part. And the value will be something like this, software troubleshooting. And let's say we also want to add an image here before our paragraph, a specific image for software troubleshooting. And I'm going to create a new key. The name of the key will be, I don't know, let's say image. And the target is located in our image folder. Let's see all files here and select the software troubleshooting JPEG. Okay, now let's use our keys. Here we will insert our key using the use content action, and we select key here and then choose our key, insert and close. And here we will use the insert image action from the toolbar. Again, choose our key and insert our key reference. Now let's copy this structure from here, from the data map, into the second section. Paste. And now let's edit our keys. For the first key, we will change software to hardware. And for the second key, we will change the target to this other image. But now if we open each reference, we don't see any change because we haven't created our key scopes. In order to create the key scopes, we will again edit the properties of our references, go to the keys tab, and here define our scopes. So the first one is software scope. And you can see it here in the data maps manager, the name of the scope between brackets. And here for the second section, for the other branch, we will create a new scope, hardware scope. And now if we try to open again our references, we can see that the keys are properly resolved. So here we have software and the proper image, and here we have hardware and the proper image. One more thing that I want to mention is that here in the top right corner, we have this label that tells us the fact that we use this topic several times in our map. We have more than one reference, and we can use these arrows to navigate from one reference to another. Okay, so this is how we use key scopes to resolve key definitions to different values in different branches when our keys have the same names. Our last topic for today is the branch filtering mechanism. But before talking about branch filtering, let's remind ourselves what we already know. So right now we know that when publishing a map, we can apply one DITA filter, and the conditions from the DITA filter will be applied globally. So if we have a map with topics, and the topics and the map uh, have content and references that are profiled for A and B, when we apply the filter for A, in the output we get only the content for A. And similarly, when applying the filter for B, we get the content for B. So this is what we knew until now. Let's say that we have the following scenario. We have a map, and we have a submap, or perhaps a topic, which we use twice. So we create two references inside our map. We create two branches. And this map, or the topic, has content that is profiled for both the X1 model and the X2 model. But here we want to apply the X1 only data val, and here we want to apply only the X2 only data val. In order to be able to set filtering conditions for distinct branches, for specific branches of a map, we have to use the branch filtering mechanism. And as I mentioned, a branch can correspond to both topic references and map references. And we use branch filtering by using the data val ref element, which, as the name suggests, will reference a data val filter that will be used when processing a map or a map branch. The location where we define this data val reference, data val ref element, will determine the content to which the conditions will be applied. As a rule, the filtering conditions are applied to the parent of the data val ref element, to the siblings of the data val ref element, and to all the resources that are referenced by the parent of the data val ref, or by the siblings of the data val ref element. In other words, the conditions are applied to both references inside the map and content inside the topic, based on the rules that we have seen here. So let's see this in Oxygen, and we're going to expand our troubleshooting section even more. So after the troubleshooting process is done, let's say we want to send the phone to the testing department. And let's assume we have two distinct testing departments for software testing and for hardware testing. Here in my project, I already have defined this quality assurance topic, which has content for both software and hardware testing, as you can see. And let's say we want to create references in both sections to this topic. We will use the insert before reference to the currently edited file action to insert a reference to the software troubleshooting section, and then another reference, insert after, another reference here in the hardware troubleshooting section. And now we need to apply our data vals for each of these references. This one has to be lower. Okay, I have my hardware testing and software testing data vals right here. So for example, the hardware testing data val excludes everything that is profiled for software. And in order to create our data val references, we will use the contextual menu on our branch on our topic reference. And here under the append child submenu, we have this data val reference action. And we use it. We browse to our data val file. So the first one is the software testing data val. And the second one is for the hardware testing. Okay, so this is how we create our data val refs. So now the conditions will be applied to the parent of the data val ref, that is this reference from here, and also to the content from inside this topic, which is referenced by the parent of data val ref element. And now it's time for us to publish our content to webhelp responsive. This will take a few seconds, and we will see how branch filtering works, and we will also check how our key scopes worked, and also how the push Conref technique also works, because we haven't seen this. I kept everything for the end. So first, let's see if our pushed Conref is where it should be. So here it is. The fourth step is now clean the SIM slot if necessary. In the troubleshooting section, we see that the key scopes, the key scope mechanism worked as expected. So the title is here as it should be, and the image is here, and also here for the hardware troubleshooting warranty check. And now let's see how the branch filtering mechanism worked. Here we have only the software profiled content, and in our hardware troubleshooting section, we should have the hardware content. Okay, I have one more slide for you. As you can imagine, we cannot discuss everything about these several topics in 40 minutes. And here I provided several useful links where you can go and read more about the topics that you are interested in. And that being said, my presentation here is now done, is now completed. I want to thank you for your attention and for your patience. And now it's time for our Q&A section. So Radu, can you please help us with the questions and the answers from our users?
Sure, Sorin, and hello everyone. Sorin, you did a very good job, and I see there are very few questions, so this means that you are clear. If anybody had trouble following Sorin, Sorin had a previous webinar about basic content reuse with DITA, so you might want to revisit that webinar and then come back to this one. The first question was about when we'll do a webinar about the new content reuse options in the DITA 2.0 standard. So the DITA 2.0 standard will probably be released this year, and after the standard is released, we'll look into it and try to integrate the new features from the standard in Oxygen's editing and publishing support. Another question is, when is the marked element in push content used to check consistency, and how is that done? So the data specification states a couple of rules about pushing elements from one topic to another, like they should either be elements with the same name, or you can push a specialization over a base element. So for example, I can push a step over and push it over a list item, and the step will automatically become a list item. So this is covered in the data specification. The publishing should check this consistency, and the Oxygen Validate and Check for Completeness button in the data maps manager also checks consistency when you push elements from one topic to another. Another question is about a recording, and it will be available in a couple of days, and you will be notified via our Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook channels. Another question, can profiling be used at step level in task topic or in any concept type element? So you can add profiling attributes on most data elements. Elements inside tasks, concepts, topics. You can filter tables, lists, list items, paragraphs, and so on. So almost anything can be filtered out and removed from the publishing. One more question, could we apply the scope one level higher too? So this question was about the fact that Sorin has two troubleshooting groups, like software troubleshooting and hardware troubleshooting, and he could have applied the key scope directly on the software troubleshooting topic instead of leaving it more closer to the defined keys. So you can define key scopes on any level, but you need to carefully pick the level where you define the key scope, because all the keys will be resolved in that particular key scope. How is the key scope bound to different keys? So for all the keys defined inside the key scope context, all references will be resolved also inside that key scope context, but you can also make key references with the qualified key scope names. So from one key scope context, you can refer to a topic in another key scope context by qualifying the key name with the key scope prefix. Are all these options available in the web editor as well? I see Sorin has worked a lot at this webinar with the data maps manager. The web author has a data maps manager, but it's not editable. But you can open a data map in the main editing area in the web browser, and you can use that editor to set key scopes and define keys on topic references. Many thanks, Sorin, for a great presentation. Uh, where would we find the schema file if we need to add new profiling options? So the data standard defines a couple of profiling attributes, and you can add more profiling attributes using data specialization, or you can use profiling attribute groups as Sorin showed, and use a profiling attribute as a way to define multiple sub-attributes. And then in Oxygen, once you have the profiling attributes defined, you can define profiling condition sets and specify how the filters occur when you publish. Another question is, the branch filtering looks like a really cool feature. Can we use that to associate a data val to a whole bookmap? You can use branch filtering to associate a data val to a whole bookmap. It it wasn't meant for that. It was meant more for having a small branch which which is published with a certain data val file. Once you use DITA-val filtering, you may encounter problems with links. So once you have DITA-val filtering, you may need to also use key scopes and in order to better define the links between topics. So you can try that, but be careful with links between topics if they still work. So once you use branch filtering, you may need to use key references for all your links. How do you specify filter options to exclude and include file names for filtering? So if you want to exclude or include a DITA topic, you can go on the topic reference, on the reference to the topic, and define a profiling filter. Um, there is no way to define, like, if I want to filter out all file names which start with topic and end with DITA, there is no way in the DITA standard to do that. Maybe you can do that at publishing time, maybe with some pre-processing step, but the profiling in DITA only covers elements which are marked with profiling attributes. How do these reuse strategies work when GitHub modules are used for reuse? So all these, once you have references to various resources and you publish, those resources need to be located on disk. So if the sub modules are checked out and they are available on the local disk, and the references point to existing files, uh, that 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 should work, but it may depend on knowing more about your current project. Um, Another question: is there a way to include instead of exclude in DITA-val files? So by default, DITA-val files exclude by default, include everything. What you can do is, in the DITA-val file, you first exclude all values for a certain attribute. So you can say prop action exclude attribute product without any value, and then you can refine this further and say prop action include product with a certain attribute value. But you need this first exclude um, filter, otherwise everything is included and you would not get any filtering. Um, Another um, question, or another so more details about the previous question is, what I meant is, what convention would writers of one repo need to honor to share same subject scheme, data vals, and key scopes? Well, this is in a way outside the scope of the DITA standard. You need to define some conventions and somehow try to have some kind of a common GitHub project which is used as a module in all your other GitHub projects and is checked out, and I don't know. Another question for the X2 and X2 Pro example. Can you just show the X Pro 2 info, like size 64 or whatnot? I'm not sure if I understand this. Just
Radu, perhaps. So let me open the topic that they are talking about. So it's this specifications. So what I understand is that our user wants to only include, to only exclude the X1 or only include. How was the question? Because I don't remember it.
so for the X2 and X2 Pro example, can you just
Yes.
show the X Pro 2 info, size 64 or whatnot?
Okay. So I understand that they want to exclude both X1 and X2. And this can be done Let me, so let's keep only X2 Pro. Let's use this one because we already have it defined. We can exclude, as Radu mentioned earlier, we can exclude everything for our product attribute and then say that we want to include only the X2 Pro. And hopefully let's X2 Pro. Now the question is, what would the publishing do, right? But I hope that I understood the question right. This is what I understood. Our user wants to only keep this content from here and exclude everything that pertains to X1 and X2. Well, now that I remember, I recently read in the specification that this is an invalid case because X2 Pro is actually a special kind of X2. So when we say that we exclude X2 or we exclude everything, that then we cannot include the X2 Pro. This is an invalid case. We first say that we want to exclude everything, and when we exclude X2, we automatically exclude X2 Pro. But then if we want to only include X2 Pro, this is not possible. So I hope I explained it so that it can be understood. So the short question is, as far as I remember from the specification, it's not possible because this is not a valid case.
All right. Next question is, does the order of exclude and include properties in the DITA val file matters? And as far as I know, from the specification, it doesn't matter. You can define the exclude and include properties in any way. And there is quite an useful topic in the specification which says how the processor should compute if a certain element is excluded or included when going through these properties. So if you drop us an email, I can give you a link to the specification. So another question, so if a child is included, the ancestors are all included by default? And the answer is not really. Maybe one of the ancestors is excluded, and it doesn't it doesn't matter anymore, because once you exclude an ancestor, you exclude the entire branch of XML elements. Any more questions? If not, if you have any other questions, or you want to go into certain questions that you had, and maybe we can give you more details when we think more about the situation, just drop us an email. So thanks everyone for attending and for the questions. And back to you, Sorin.
And from me, back to Alin. But before that, I want to thank you again for your patience and for your attention. And we'll see you in a future webinar. And now back to you, Alin.
Thank you. Thank you for passing me the control. Okay, first of all, Sorin, thank you for another great presentation. And of course, thank you, Radu, for helping us with our audience's questions. Now, before moving on, let me say that the event is being recorded. Let me remind you that, And you will find the recording along with Sorin's sample files and slides on the event page. And if you have any comments or questions regarding the presentation, you can write to us directly by using the Oxygen Feedback commenting platform found at the bottom of this very same page. Also, make sure to check our list of events. Um, the upcoming events, but also the past events where you can find the other webinars that Sorin had in his series working with DITA in Oxygen. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about our upcoming schedule. And next week, we prepared for all of you the following webinar: transforming XML and HTML documents to PDF. The second part, hosted by Julian Lecour, where we will go into lists, tables, and images. So if you watched our previous webinar on CSS customization and you want to continue your journey into defining the look and format of your documents, well, this is the second part. So this is a webinar geared toward novices and people that want to advance more into CSS. Well, with this being said, make sure to check our events page again, where you can also find the links to register for all of these great events. But reaching the end of this very event, let me thank again Sorin for this great presentation, and also Radu Koravu. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for joining us again this week, and I hope to meet you all again next time. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Stay safe, everyone.